Mama, you need to leave Abuja immediately. Chioma's voice cracked as she held the surveillance photos of her mother shopping for groceries outside the Wuz market, completely unaware someone had documented her every movement for 3 weeks. The envelope from Seoul contained 12 photographs spanning different days, each one a calculated message that chilled her to the bone. Below the images, Korean characters spelled out words that made her hands tremble: "Stop talking, or she disappears forever." "What are you saying, my daughter?" Her mother's confused voice came through the phone from their family compound, 800 miles away from Lagos. "Leave for where? This is our home. Your father built this house with his own hands before you were born. Mama, please listen to me carefully." Chioma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of a war she never wanted to fight crushing down on her shoulders like concrete blocks. "Someone very dangerous is watching you. They know where you shop, when you leave the house, what time you come home from church on Sundays. Who would watch an old woman like me? What have I done wrong? You gave birth to me. That's all." The words tasted like poison in Chioma's mouth. That's crime enough for these people. Before we continue, subscribe now to Mystic Tales by Luna, where every story holds a secret and a cost. 6 months had passed since her vindication, since the world learned how the Kim family had weaponized love to destroy innocent women across continents. International media had called her story a triumph of justice over systematic oppression. But staring at these photos, at the clinical precision of the surveillance, she realized her freedom had been nothing but an illusion designed to make her feel safe while they prepared their real attack. That envelope was just the beginning of a war I never saw coming. She studied the postmark again with a lawyer's trained eye for detail. Seoul. Not Singapore, where Jae-won rotted in his maximum security prison cell, but Seoul, where his family still controlled an empire built on the broken lives of women like her. The Kim patriarch had survived his son's exposure, adapted his methods, evolved his strategies. And now he was hunting her with the patience of a predator who had never faced real consequences. "Mama, I'm sending Uncle Emeka to get you within the hour. Pack only what you need for 2 weeks. We'll explain everything when you're somewhere safe." Chioma's lawyer voice took over, the same tone that had rebuilt her life from the ashes of betrayal. But underneath the professional composure, her heart hammered with a terror she hadn't felt since those first nights in her Korean prison cell, when she'd realized the man she loved had orchestrated her destruction. "Promise me you'll wait for Emeka before you leave the house for anything. Not even to check the gate or water the garden." "You're scaring me, Chioma." "Good. Being scared will keep you alive." The second envelope arrived exactly 48 hours later, delivered to her law office during lunch when most of her staff had gone home. This time, it contained something that stopped her breath entirely: photographs of 47 women across 12 countries, each image stamped with a red target symbol that looked like crosshairs from a sniper's scope. Women she'd never met but whose stories she knew intimately through their desperate emails and late-night phone calls. The Japanese executive who'd been framed for corporate espionage after her Korean husband used her security clearance to steal industrial secrets. The Philippine nurse whose medical license had been exploited to smuggle experimental drugs before she was arrested and her husband disappeared. The Brazilian architect whose revolutionary designs had been stolen and patented under her Korean spouse's company name before she was discarded and sued for copyright infringement. All of them had reached out to her after her story exploded across international news networks. All of them wanted justice for crimes that mirrored her own experience. And now all of them were being systematically hunted by an organization with resources that spanned continents. The letter accompanying the photos was written in perfect English, typed on expensive paper with a letterhead she didn't recognize: "Ms. Okafor, your individual victory has inspired unfortunate complications. These women have begun organizing under your leadership, believing they can achieve similar outcomes. This ends immediately, or they face the same fate as Yuki Tanaka and the 12 others who chose defiance over wisdom." Chioma's blood turned to ice water. Yuki Tanaka was the Japanese woman who had supposedly committed suicide by jumping from her Tokyo apartment balcony. But the clinical tone of this letter, the casual mention of 12 others, suggested something far more sinister than depression or shame driving women to self-destruction. Her encrypted phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Sarah Chen, a human rights lawyer in Geneva who specialized in international domestic violence cases. Emergency summit required. They're targeting all of us simultaneously across multiple countries. Intelligence sources confirm coordinated operation. Can you lead a unified response? Time is running out. The moment I agreed to lead them, I signed my own death warrant. But looking at those 47 faces, thinking of Yuki Tanaka's suicide, and the 12 others who had died for choosing defiance, Chioma realized she had no choice. Individual justice wasn't enough when the system itself was designed to protect predators with money and political connections. This had to become something bigger, something that couldn't be silenced by intimidation or eliminated by accidents. Yes, she typed back with fingers that felt disconnected from her body. Geneva. 1 week. Maximum security protocols. Understood. Bringing evidence that will change everything. The rabbit hole goes deeper than any of us imagined. The flight to Switzerland felt like traveling toward her own execution while wearing a blindfold. Every passenger seemed to watch her too closely, their eyes lingering on her face with recognition that made her skin crawl. Every delay felt calculated, every announcement over the intercom sounded like coded communications between hunters tracking their prey. When she finally reached her hotel room at the Beau Rivage, Chioma double-locked the door, engaged the security chain, and checked every corner, every closet, every shadow where someone might hide before allowing herself to breathe properly. But safety was another illusion, as fragile as the love she'd once believed in. The coalition began arriving the next morning like soldiers reporting for a war they might not survive. Dr. Sarah Chen from Hong Kong, her legal expertise in international human rights law making her invaluable despite the price on her head. Maria Santos from Sao Paulo, whose architectural firm had been systematically destroyed by her Korean ex-husband's family before they tried to have her committed to a psychiatric institution. Priya Sharma from Mumbai, whose groundbreaking medical research had been plagiarized and weaponized before she was framed for insurance fraud that nearly sent her to prison for 20 years. Each woman carried the same haunted expression Chioma recognized in her own mirror, the look of someone who'd trusted completely, loved without reservation, and been systematically betrayed by people who viewed their emotions as weaknesses to exploit rather than gifts to treasure. We're not dealing with isolated criminals anymore, Sarah explained during their first meeting in a secured conference room that she'd swept for electronic surveillance devices. This is a coordinated international network operating with government protection in multiple countries. We've identified similar patterns of romantic manipulation and legal exploitation in Japan, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, Brazil, Nigeria, India, Kenya, Morocco, Turkey, Greece, and now emerging evidence in Russia and Eastern Europe. How many victims are we talking about total? Chioma asked, though she dreaded hearing numbers that would make her individual suffering feel microscopic compared to the scope of systematic abuse. Over 300 confirmed cases spanning 15 years, but our research suggests the actual number could be triple that when you include women who were too terrified to come forward or whose cases were buried by local authorities. These families have diplomatic protection, trade relationships worth billions that governments won't risk disrupting, and enough political influence to make investigations disappear. They're essentially untouchable through conventional legal channels. Priya leaned forward across the polished conference table, her voice carrying the steel that had helped her survive 2 years fighting false charges in the Indian judicial system. That's exactly why we need you to lead this coalition, Chioma. Your case broke through international barriers that seemed impossible to breach. People listen to you in ways they won't listen to the rest of us. It's not just about your victory in court, Maria added quietly, her eyes reflecting pain that ran deeper than words could express. It's because you survived something designed to completely destroy you and came out stronger. You proved it's possible to fight back and win against people who believe they're untouchable. But even as they planned their strategy for exposing the network and protecting future victims, Chioma felt invisible walls closing in around them. Phone calls that cut off the moment someone answered. Elevators that stopped on floors no one had selected, doors opening to reveal empty hallways that felt like threats. Shadows that moved too precisely in her peripheral vision, always staying just outside direct sight. The attack came on their fourth day in Geneva, swift and coordinated like a military operation. Chioma returned to her hotel room after dinner at a small restaurant where they discussed legal strategies for international prosecution. The door stood slightly ajar, which her paranoid security protocols would never have allowed. Every survival instinct her prison experience had burned into her consciousness screamed immediate danger, but she forced herself to think like a lawyer rather than a victim. Evidence. Documentation. Proof of systematic intimidation. She pushed the door open with her foot and stepped inside, her phone already recording video. Scattered across her bed like tarot cards predicting doom were surveillance photographs that made her knees buckle with their implications. Not just photos of herself and the coalition members, but intimate shots of them with their families taken in locations that should have been impossible to access. Sarah's teenage daughter leaving her exclusive Hong Kong prep school, completely unaware of the telephoto lens capturing her vulnerability. Maria's elderly parents lighting candles at morning mass in their Sao Paulo neighborhood church. Priya's young son playing cricket in the supposedly secure courtyard of his Mumbai private school. But what made her stomach drop toward the floor were the official badges visible in several photographs. Seoul Metropolitan Police credentials. Korean National Intelligence Service identification cards. These weren't rogue operatives working outside the law, this was official government surveillance being used to terrorize women across international boundaries. Every face in those photos was a target marked for elimination. Her hands shook as she gathered the evidence, understanding finally that they weren't fighting a criminal family or even a network of criminal families. They were fighting an entire system designed to protect wealth and power at any cost, including the systematic abuse of women who dared to seek justice against men with enough money to purchase government protection. That's when she heard the footsteps in the hallway outside her room. Slow, deliberate, stopping right outside her door with the confidence of people who had no fear of consequences. The next 2 hours felt like being hunted through a maze designed by someone who knew every escape route and had positioned guards at every exit. Chioma fled through the hotel's service corridors, past startled staff members and confused guests, her lawyer's mind automatically cataloging every detail while her survival instincts screamed at her to run faster, hide better, trust no one. She made it to Sarah's room on the 7th floor, gasping and clutching the surveillance photos like life preservers in an ocean of systematic corruption. But when Sarah opened her door, her face was pale with terror that mirrored Chioma's own fear. "They took Priya 3 hours ago," Sarah whispered, pulling her inside and immediately engaging multiple locks. Hotel security claims she never came back from dinner, but her keycard shows electronic entry to her room an hour after she disappeared. Someone else is using her access. What about Maria? Missing since this morning. But look at this. Sarah handed her a tablet displaying news feeds from around the world, headlines that made Chioma's blood freeze in her veins. It's not just us in Geneva. They're moving against our entire network simultaneously across multiple continents. The screen displayed breaking news that felt like watching her worst nightmares manifest in real time. Nigerian lawyers' associates detained in Sao Paulo on terrorism charges. Medical fraud investigation reopened in Mumbai following anonymous tips. International human rights attorney under investigation for tax evasion and money laundering in Hong Kong. The system was dismantling their entire coalition with surgical precision, using legal frameworks to destroy women who had dared to challenge men with enough wealth to purchase government protection. "We have to run," Sarah said, already packing her laptop and encrypted files with the desperate efficiency of someone who'd fled persecution before. "Disappear completely before they." "No. The word came out stronger than Chioma felt, carrying authority she'd learned in the Korean prison system where showing weakness meant becoming prey. Running means they win. Running means Yuki Tanaka and the 12 others died for nothing. Running means every woman who comes after us faces the same systematic destruction. Chioma, they have diplomatic immunity covering their crimes. Government protection spanning multiple countries. Intelligence agencies providing surveillance and enforcement. We can't fight entire nations with unlimited resources. Then we don't fight governments through traditional channels. We bypass them entirely. In that moment, staring at photographs of women who'd trusted her with their lives and their hope for justice, Chioma realized individual vindication would never be enough to create real change. The system protected predators because it benefited from their crimes, receiving financial contributions and political support in exchange for looking the other way when wealthy men destroyed women for profit and entertainment. But systems could be exposed to public scrutiny. Broken by international outrage. Rebuilt through popular demand for accountability. Sarah, can you set up a global live stream using encrypted networks? Something they can't shut down through legal challenges or technical interference? Theoretically, yes. But the risks. The risk of doing nothing is greater than the risk of everything. If they want to destroy us quietly in backroom deals and diplomatic channels, we make noise they can't silence through intimidation or bribery. The next 18 hours became a race against systematic annihilation. While Sarah built their digital platform using encrypted networks and international servers beyond the reach of any single government, Chioma reached out to every journalist, human rights organization, and legal advocate who'd covered her story or expressed interest in international domestic violence cases. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source that changed everything. Ms. Okafor? The voice on her encrypted phone belonged to someone she'd never expected to hear from again, someone whose testimony had helped send her to prison. This is Detective Park from Seoul Metropolitan Police. I was the lead investigator involved in your original arrest and conviction. Chioma's blood chilled to Arctic temperatures. Are you calling to threaten me as well? To tell me what horrible fate awaits if I don't surrender quietly? I'm calling because my 16-year-old daughter asked me a question 3 months ago that I couldn't answer. She asked why police officers protect criminals when we're supposed to protect victims. I've been thinking about that question every single day since then, and I finally understand that she was asking why I participated in destroying an innocent woman to protect guilty men. What do you want from me, Detective Park? I want to give you evidence that will destroy the Kim family and their government protection network forever. Complete financial records, audio recordings, video surveillance, diplomatic communications. Everything needed to expose 15 years of systematic abuse with official government complicity. Why would you risk your career and possibly your life to help me? Because I want to be able to look my daughter in the eyes and tell her that her father chose to protect victims instead of criminals. But you have to promise me something in return. What kind of promise? Promise me this ends with them being held accountable for everything. Promise me no more women disappear because powerful men know they can buy protection from justice. Promise me my daughter will inherit a world where love isn't weaponized by predators. That chill I felt in that moment, have you ever felt that too? When your heart knows something before your mind catches up. When you realize that sometimes justice requires breaking rules designed to protect the guilty rather than the innocent? I promise you that, Detective Park, Chioma whispered into the encrypted connection. I promise your daughter will know her father chose courage over complicity. 3 hours later, Detective Park uploaded files through an anonymous server that changed everything about their understanding of the Kim family's criminal operations. Financial records showing systematic payments to government officials across 12 countries, with amounts large enough to influence policy decisions and legal proceedings. Audio recordings of the Kim patriarch discussing disposal methods for problematic foreign assets in language that made murder sound like business strategy. Video evidence of diplomatic meetings where immunity from prosecution was purchased with campaign contributions and promises of future economic cooperation. But the most damning evidence was a spreadsheet containing 312 names of women who'd been systematically targeted over 15 years. Next to each name was a status indicator: imprisoned, deported, discredited, institutionalized, or most chillingly, eliminated. Yuki Tanaka's name was marked eliminated. So were 12 others whose deaths had been disguised as suicides, accidents, or unexplained disappearances. The global live stream launched at exactly 3 p.m. Geneva time, calculated to reach the maximum number of international viewers when overlapping time zones created peak global internet usage. Chioma sat in front of a simple camera setup in a location they'd kept secret even from themselves until the final moment, a rented warehouse outside the city where no government could claim jurisdiction to shut them down. "My name is Chioma Okafor," she began, her voice carrying the strength that 3 years of systematic torture had forged into unbreakable steel. "6 months ago, you learned how I was betrayed by a Korean billionaire who used our marriage to frame me for his family's crimes. Today, you're going to learn that my story wasn't unique, wasn't isolated, wasn't even unusual. It was a business model refined through 15 years of practice on over 300 victims." As she spoke, displaying the evidence Detective Park had provided on screen for viewers around the world, the viewer count climbed exponentially. 1 million people watching. 5 million. 10 million. Social media platforms exploded with hashtags in 27 languages, hashtag love weapon, hashtag marriage fraud, hashtag systemic betrayal, hashtag justice for all. But the moment that broke the internet and changed history came when other women began joining the stream from secure locations around the world. Sarah appeared on screen from a safe house in Hong Kong, then Maria from an undisclosed location in Brazil where allies had helped her escape government persecution. Then Priya, who'd been rescued by Mumbai police officers who refused to cooperate with diplomatic pressure, speaking from a secure facility surrounded by supporters. One by one, 47 women from 12 countries told their stories live to a global audience that grew to 37 million viewers simultaneously. Stories of systematic manipulation, legal exploitation, and government-protected abuse that revealed a pattern so extensive it defied comprehension. The system's protection had always relied on silence, on keeping victims isolated and ashamed, on maintaining the illusion that each woman's suffering was individual rather than systematic. But when 37 million people watched those women speak truth to power simultaneously across multiple continents and time zones, silence became impossible to maintain. Government phone systems crashed in Seoul, Tokyo, Manila, Brasilia, New Delhi as citizens demanded explanations for their officials' complicity in systematic abuse. Trade relationships that had protected criminal families for decades suddenly became massive political liabilities as public outrage demanded immediate action and accountability. This is not just about the Kim family or even about the network of families who learned from their methods, Chioma concluded, staring directly into the camera with the authority of someone who'd survived systematic destruction and emerged stronger. This is about a system that weaponizes love, that treats women as disposable tools for criminal enterprises, that protects predators when they have enough money and political connections to purchase immunity from consequences. But today, that system breaks. Today, we choose each other over the comfort of silence. Today, we prove that truth doesn't need permission from power, that justice doesn't require approval from the corrupt, that love, real love, is stronger than the weapon that wears its name. The stream continued for 4 hours, with women from additional countries joining to share their experiences and evidence of similar networks operating across continents. By the time they signed off, the viewer count had reached 43 million people across 6 continents, creating a global movement that no government could ignore or suppress. The impact continued rippling across the world with unstoppable momentum. Within 24 hours, the United Nations Security Council called an emergency session to address systematic international domestic violence with government complicity. Within 48 hours, 5 governments had launched independent investigations into diplomatic immunity abuse and officially requested extradition of suspects. Within 1 week, the International Criminal Court announced the creation of a special tribunal for marriage-based international fraud, with jurisdiction to prosecute cases involving government complicity in systematic abuse. The Kim patriarch, who had survived his son's exposure and continued hunting women across continents with government protection, found himself extradited to face charges in 12 countries simultaneously. No amount of diplomatic immunity could shield him from 43 million witnesses demanding justice. But the real victory came in a phone call 3 months later that reminded Chioma why the fight had been worth every risk. Chioma? The voice belonged to Elena Petrov, a Russian computer programmer whose story had emerged during the investigation, revealing networks operating in Eastern Europe that mirrored the Asian model. I wanted to thank you personally. Because of what you did, because of the courage you showed, my 15-year-old daughter will never have to choose between love and safety. She'll grow up knowing that predators who hide behind power and wealth can still be exposed and held accountable. That's what we fought for, Chioma replied, standing in her new office overlooking Lagos Harbor, where the International Coalition for Marriage Justice had established its headquarters. The organization had become a recognized NGO with funding from 8 countries and an official mandate to investigate and prosecute romantic fraud networks globally. But this victory opened a door to an even bigger fight, she continued, looking at the stack of case files covering her desk. New networks were emerging in Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and South America. The Kim model was spreading, evolving, adapting to increased scrutiny by becoming more sophisticated and better hidden. But the women fighting those networks were evolving too, sharing intelligence and resources across international boundaries that had once kept them isolated and vulnerable. That envelope that threatened my family? It became evidence that changed everything. Because sometimes the very thing meant to destroy you becomes the tool that builds something stronger than what existed before. Outside her window, Lagos glittered with evening lights reflecting off the harbor, each pinpoint of illumination representing a life, a story, a woman who deserved protection instead of exploitation. The war against systematic abuse was far from over, but the system's greatest weapon, enforced silence through intimidation, had been permanently shattered by the voices of women who refused to disappear quietly. And Chioma Okafor, who had once been broken by a betrayal designed to be perfect in its cruelty, had learned that some victories are worth every scar they cost to achieve, every risk they require to pursue, every sacrifice they demand to secure. The phone on her desk rang with its familiar tone. Another victim reaching out for help. Another story waiting to be heard. Another chance to prove that love, real love, always defeats the weapon that wears its name. She answered on the first ring, as she always did. The work continued, and it always would, until no woman anywhere had to choose between trusting her heart and protecting her life. Because that choice should never exist in a world where justice means something more than what money can buy.